Bing was the first multimedia entertainer. He was big in movies, big on radio, big on records. He was damn good.
Oh, I wished I'd have said that.
I'm no millionaire, but I'm not the type to care.
At his height, he was singing to 50 million people a week.
He had more #1 records than anybody in history, certainly more than the Beatles or Elvis.
Every woman in the world wanted to marry Bing Crosby, whether they were married already or not.
Wealth on Wall Street for a road where nature trods.
He made everybody feel that they could sing just as good as he could, and they couldn't.
And he made it look effortless. Whether he was on stage or in front of a camera, everything was very authentic and very who he was.
No one has ever done so much with so little, for so long, for so much.
He was singing in a style that laid the groundwork for Sinatra and everybody that came after. Any modern singer, whether they've heard of him or not, owes him a debt of gratitude.
But history doesn't see Bing that way. History sees him as the guy who comes out every year and sings White Christmas.
Nobody would dream that Crosby would fade. He was not only one of the most important voices of the 20th century, he was incredibly entertaining.
I assumed that people remembered how much they loved him.
Some guy come up and he said, didn't you used to be Bing Crosby?
Oh. Was he really the easygoing guy that you see on the screen? Yes, he was. That wasn't an act. That was part of the real guy. But it wasn't all of the real guy.
I can live in luxury, 'cause I've got a pocket full of dreams.
Let's take a song like Moonlight Becomes You. The way the sheet music is written, moonlight becomes you, it goes with your hair. Bing would sing it, moonlight becomes you, it goes with your hair.
You certainly know the right thing to wear.
It becomes conversational, but he also changes the notes. Songwriters never complained about the way that Bing would change the melody because in some cases it really made the song seem better.
What a night to go dreaming. Mind if I tag along?
What Bing created was the art of intimacy. He sang very quiet and very understated. He just realized you don't have to, you're singing to someone's eyes, you're singing to someone's ears, and you don't have to push.
Moonlight becomes you so.
It's about phrasing, but it's also about seeing how far you can go, playing with the melody, but somehow staying within the confines of the song. Bing evolved that, and it came from jazz, it came from Louis Armstrong, but it also came from this innate ability that he had that was truly his own.
Moonlight becomes you so.
As Artie Shaw said, he was the first hip white person born in the United States.
Bing gets the call from this high school kid, Al Rinker, who's, I think, 17 at the time. And Al Rinker's got this little band called the Musicalators, and they've lost their drummer.
Somebody's told us about it. Bing Crosby had a set of drums, and he was pretty good. So we had him come over to my house. He played, and he hit the cymbal. He sang a couple things. He said, oh, boy, this is great.
How do you like a bugle call rag? You like it played as a waltz or a Dixieland shag? I'll take the words right out of your mouth. You got to play it the same as the sound. In New York or any town, when a band swings out low down.
I imagine I always was singing a little around the house and in the grade school choral groups. But I think I really went at it seriously when I was about 12.
He'd been educated in the popular songs by his father, who had a big record collection.
The father was Happy Harry, later known as Hollywood Harry. Played the mandolin, sang, rarely had a decent job.
He was the life of the party, but not so good in terms of taking care of business. And that was Catherine Harrigan, who had all these kids and ran the show.
Harry Lillis Crosby was the fourth of 7 children born into an Irish Catholic working-class family on May 3rd, 1903.
Bing, what's the origin of the name Bing? That wasn't on your birth certificate, was it?
No,
it was Harry.
Harry Lewis. No, there was a comic strip when I was a little boy called the Bingville Bugle. I used to go around saying bingo, bingo, so they hung the name on me, Bing.
Obsessed with vaudeville, sports, and girls, Crosby attends virtually every stage performance that comes through town.
I just wanted to be connected with show business. I just wanted to be part of that scene, to be on the stage, to be around people who were entertainers. I didn't have any idea I'd be an important singer, if I am one.
By 1925, Rinker and Crosby feel they've outgrown Spokane.
Well, I said, my sister, Mildred Bailey, is living down in Los Angeles, and I know she's singing in some clubs down there. Let's get in the old car and get out of town.
They arrive on November 7th, 1925, and quickly start booking dates in and around Los Angeles. Less than a year later, they come to the attention of the most popular band leader in the country, Paul Whiteman, who asked to meet the duo.
He was seated on a massive bed, looked like a giant Buddha, and he had a pound of caviar in his lap and a bottle of very important champagne on his breakfast table. And I thought, this is really the ultimate in luxury and attainment, to have reached the stage where you can have caviar and champagne for breakfast.
Well, we toured all around with Whiteman and Johnny, and we joined him in Chicago, and then we toured all around, you know, Cleveland, Cincinnati, and those places for about 10 weeks, and we did very well. In fact, I think we were smashed. We went into New York, the New York Paramount, and laid a sensational omelet, just nothing. Absolutely an egg. He had to take us off the bill after the second or third show.
Stage microphones were virtually non-existent at the time. When Rinker and Crosby got in front of the band, they were barely audible in the cavernous 3,600-seat theater. An embarrassed Whiteman was considering sending his protégés home when Crosby and Rinker were rescued by an introduction to a wildly kinetic singer and pianist, Harry Barris.
He pulls out this song called Mississippi Mud, and they start working on it, and then they ask Whiteman to come hear it. They knock his socks off. And he puts him on the stage doing that, and suddenly the Rhythm Boys are it in New York.
Look at my doorstep, look at my doorstep, look at the bluebirds, look at the blackbirds, look at the good luck, look at the bad luck, look at the good luck and the bad luck there. I never saw bluebirds mingle with blackbirds, I never saw bluebirds doing things backwards, never knew good luck ever could perch with.
The Rhythm Boys had something that converted jazz into pop music, and people went crazy for these guys. They were superstars of their time.
Now they're the toast of New York. He can't walk into a speakeasy without people offering to buy him drinks, so he starts drinking a lot.
During production of The King of Jazz, Crosby is arrested after almost driving his car through the lobby of the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel.
Came up in front of the judge, and he looked at the complaint, and he said, "Here, I see HBD." I said, "What does that mean?" He said, "Had been drinking." I said, "Oh, yes, I had a few." He said, "Well, don't you know that there's a prohibition law in the United States now?" Oh, I said, "Nobody pays any attention to that." He said, "Well, you'll have 30 days to pay some attention to it." Clang, you know?
Whiteman famously said he wasn't hard to work with. He was hard to find sometimes.
We were a little drunk with power, yes. What we wouldn't do, we wouldn't learn any new songs. We just wouldn't get together and rehearse, that's all. And we had about 12 songs, and then we wouldn't learn any more. So Whiteman says, "Hey, what's going on here, you guys? You're out playing golf, you're out chasing girls. You're not doing me any good this way."
Whether the Rhythm Boys were fired from or quit Whiteman's band is a matter of interpretation.
I've got those half-happy.
Some people said that Bing did everything wrong to become a star by not turning up on time for recording sessions, by wild partying, by going with too many ladies, and despite that, he rolled uphill to success.
All the newspaper stories are all about Dixie Lee, Fox starlet, marries singer. Even the New York Times gets his name wrong, calling him Murray Crosby. She's the one who has a career.
You couldn't escape feeling the love between the two of them. She was a wonderful woman, a beautiful lady, and she gave up a career for Bing.
Tomatoes, yeah.
But you're as cold as yesterday's mashed potatoes.
Potatoes.
Harry Warner warned Dixie Lee to stay away from this gigolo and said he's just a carouser, he's a partier. Yeah, he's got a decent voice, but he'll be in your pocket for the rest of your professional career. Just stay away.
You won't even wrestle.
He was amongst some of the greatest drinkers in the world, with Big Spiderback and Trombar and some of that group. They had the heavyweight belt championship. They were belters. He drank, and he drank too much, and he became irresponsible.
Dolores Hope said, if you missed Bing, go back to the last place you were. You might find him under the table.
1 year into the marriage, Dixie is fed up with Crosby's partying and announces to the press that she is divorcing him. Crosby convinces her that he will cut back, and they reunite. Ironically, by this time, Lee herself has developed a serious addiction to alcohol.
From what I understand, not from my mom, but from Rosie Clooney and from Dolores Hope, is that Dad could handle it and Dixie couldn't keep up. And it got her.
Between 1933 and 1938, the couple have 4 sons: Gary, twins Dennis and Philip, and Lindsay. Always painfully shy, Dixie retreats from public life as her drinking problem worsens.
Oh boy, this is a fine romance.
The Rhythm Boys land a job at the Coconut Grove nightclub in Los Angeles. Crosby is quickly singled out, and soon after the release of his first solo recording, the group disbands.
'Cause deep down in my heart I say, I surrendered it.
When Crosby comes to prominence in the 1930s, all the other guys are kind of square singers. You can hear the difference in 3 versions of Brother, Can You Spare a Dime?
They used to tell me I was building a dream, and so I followed the mob.
You listen to Rudy Valley. Rudy Valley is very straight, kind of stentorian. And then there's Jolson, who's the vaudevillian, who's over the top.
Say, don't you remember? Don't you remember? They called me Al. It was Al. Al all the time.
And here comes this guy who is hip. He's doing jazz phrasing. It's very modern and conversational.
They called me Al. It was Al all the time. Why don't you remember? I'm your pal. Say, buddy, can you spare a dime?
Nobody else would have been able to phrase that way. Nobody would have thought of interpreting the song that way, because he was already a good decade and a half in his singing style ahead of what everybody else was doing. Because of the invention of the microphone, your voice did not need to be sung like this, because the microphone captured the intimacy.
You came, I was alone. I should have known you were temptation.
But that was only the beginning. His genius was that he began to use it as an instrument. He began to understand the way it altered dynamics. It meant all kinds of nuances were possible. It meant that you could bring a song down almost to a whisper. And that brings an eroticism to music that simply did not exist in any precinct of American popular music.
If it can never be, pity me.
In 1930, fewer than a third of American homes had radios. By 1935, fewer than a third did not.
The man who founded CBS Radio, William Paley, is struggling to get any traction for the network because NBC has 2 networks, the red and the blue, and they really own the airwaves. Paley is on a cruise somewhere in the Atlantic, and he hears a recording of Bing Crosby, and he wires back to people, and he says, get hold of this guy.
Paley signs Crosby to the most lucrative contract in the history of radio.
So, of course, there's a certain amount of excitement building. And Monday night comes and Bing doesn't show. Tuesday night, he's not ready, so they just decide to make the premiere on Wednesday.
It was our announced intention to present Bing Crosby's initial program Monday night, but a severe attack of laryngitis made it impossible for him to appear until tonight.
The producer says, "What do you think?" And Paley looks down at his shoes, and he just says, "I hope he's got it."
Just one more chance to prove it's you alone I care for. Each night I say a little prayer for. Just one more chance.
Bing! Bing! Bing!
The response is beyond anyone's expectations. Almost overnight, Crosby is a nationwide radio star.
He was attacked at a Sunday Mass by the Archbishop of Boston as a degenerate because it was so sexual. There were a number of divorce actions brought in which Crosby was named as a correspondent because he alienated the wife's affections. She was spending all her time listening to him on the radio.
I surrender, dear. Just one more word.
Crosby's success saved CBS Radio. For the next 31 years, he will dominate the airwaves as no other performer has done before or since. Just One More Chance, Crosby's debut radio song, was from a record produced by Jack Kapp. The son of a record store owner, Kapp knew every facet of the business and had an infallible ability to assess popular taste.
At the very depth of the Depression, Jack Kapp comes along and decides it's time to start a new record company. Everybody thought he was completely crazy. He could only do it with Crosby as collateral. And Crosby said, "Jack, wherever you go, I will go with you."
And now the purple dusk of twilight time steals across the meadows of my heart.
When Crosby was in his heyday, single records were released. There was an A-side and a B-side. He made 600 singles. That's 1,200 songs, 1,200 sides. That's an enormous amount of material. And there were so many of these records that were on the charts, it was unbelievable.
Jack Kapp said, "You are a popular singer. People want to buy your records. So let's give them every kind of song we can think of." He turned Bing into the all-purpose singer. And Bing went along with it.
Crosby explored every class of song, from hymns and spirituals to Hawaiian, Irish, French, light opera, and R&B. No other singer's catalog is comparable. Through Crosby, American popular music came of age, relaxing the prejudices that isolated pop, jazz, and every other idiom he addressed. By 1941, the deeply satisfied Kapp would boast, if he hadn't diversified his talent, he would have remained just a popular singer of popular songs.
As Bing gains more and more fame, his style of singing becomes less and less jazzy and more homogenized in a way that made him iconic and a household name, but musically, in some ways, less interesting.
For all the trust Crosby put into Kapp, the relationship was not without its tense moments.
Come on, will you have a thing?
You want to make this
I
thing
want you to sing
the way we rehearsed it or not?
Sing the first chorus. I don't care what you do after that, but sing the first chorus.
No.
Well, now you lose it arbitrarily.
No, I don't think so. I think you're behind.
No, I leave it to the jury.
You want it that way?
Sing the first chorus. What do you say? For Christ's sake, come on.
Jack, you got 15 minutes?
All right, you can make it in 6.
You want it that way?
Come on, sing the first
The boys don't want
chorus.
to sit
Yes,
around
they
and
do.
listen to this endless bickering. They want to either get it made or go home.
I know, they want to hear
I'm
I wish
sure
them
I'm
home.
similarly minded. I want to either make it or screw it.
Listen, do whatever you want, Bing. Listen, I'm not going to argue with you. This means more to you than it does to me. Now, come on now.
To me.
After fighting with Kapp, initially he said, you know, Jack had these ideas and they seemed to work. And at some point I just said, Jack, whatever you want.
Crosby will ultimately record 23 gold and platinum records, have 41 #1 hits, and to this day, is widely considered the most electronically recorded voice in history.
Out where they say, let us be gay, I'm going Hollywood.
It wasn't long before Hollywood came calling. Mack Sennett, the king of silent comedies, was looking for actors with good voices. A singer with comic timing was a godsend. Clearly the standout performer in the 8 shorts he makes for Sennett, Crosby begins to establish his on-screen persona. Mischievous and unpretentious, a unique combination of sophistication and subversion. He is quickly signed to a contract with Paramount Studios, where he will remain for over 25 years.
He killed the leading man idea. Suddenly you've got a guy who looks very normal. He had big ears, he was a little overweight, he was bald, he had to wear a toupee.
You've got a nice face. Thanks. Take a good look at it. I still think it's nice.
I weighed about 190 pounds those days. I used to give Chapman's ice cream parlor in Hollywood quite a beating. And we used to have quite a job every morning shoehorning me into the wardrobe. I really looked like a piece of southern knockwurst gathered in the middle.
You had a whole country that was in a depression. It was Bing who depicted every man's position. He was just a good neighbor. He was the kind of guy that I'd love to have Bing Crosby as a neighbor. I know he'd be a wonderful friend to have.
The lavish lifestyle of Hollywood stars was old news by the late 1930s. But rather than begrudge Crosby, his fans took vicarious pleasure in his good fortune, as well as a measure of proof that America itself was not in irreversible decline.
Just found a hole in my shoe and my stocking shows through. Ho hum, ho ho hum.
By 1940, with 24 films under his belt, Crosby's film career is at a crossroads. At 37, he does not possess the manic energy for screwball comedy, and though he can ride a horse better than any Western star, cowboy roles are not an option, nor were detective, husband, or father roles. It becomes difficult to know not only how to cast him, but who to cast him with.
We had Bob on last night. Bob Hope was on last night. And when did you first meet Bob? How
Out
far
on the
back
Friars Club in New York. I met him around there, shot some pool with him, and he rolled me pretty good. Then we worked at the Capitol Theater together.
Did you ever catch his act?
I stood in the wings once.
Did he have a good act?
No, it was awful.
I was a master of ceremonies and Bing was a star. We were doing these shows and it got a little boring, so we started ad-libbing together. And we worked out a routine. That was in 1932. Then 1937, I came out to Paramount and Bing invited me down to Zelmar. And we did the same routine that we did in the Capitol, New York.
My partner and I will give you our impression of 2 orchestra leaders meeting on the boulevard.
2 orchestra leaders meeting on the boulevard.
And the audience loved it. And there was somebody there from Paramount. He went back to the studio and said, "We got to put these guys together."
But the producers at Paramount didn't know that they had ever even met. They think they're making all this up. And they can't believe it. They've just found these 2 geniuses.
When 2 guys pull together, it's teamwork. In foul or sunny weather, it's teamwork. What does it take to make any business climb? You'll find it takes teamwork every time.
He just loved getting into this hokey stuff. In fact, a lot of the producers said to me, "Boy, I'm sure glad you got Bing doing low comedy, because we never could get him to do that." And he loved it. He loved to get laughs, and he loved to be in that kind of an atmosphere.
There's a theme running through these movies, especially since most of them were made during the war, which is that America is colonizing the rest of the world with vaudeville. Bing always gets the woman. Bing always sells out Bob in the cruelest ways. He sells him into slavery. He shoots him out of a cannon. He puts him in a tank with an octopus. There was more portrayal in those movies than anything since Restoration drama. Still, you're always rooting for Bing, and all of the comic timing that you've seen in bits and pieces throughout the films going back to the Mack Sennett shorts really begins to flower.
Unless you got teamwork, there's no team.
Before James Bond, the Road films were the most successful franchise in the history of cinema. Launching Bob Hope as a major star, the series revitalized Crosby's career by exposing him to a younger audience who marveled at the on-screen irreverence.
Look!
They're parodying the popular Hollywood movies of the day.
Humphrey Bogart. Boy, is he lost.
The fourth wall leads them to complete absurdity and lunacy and a kind of meta storytelling that would become popular in the 80s.
Come on, help yourself. This is no sailboat, you know.
I'm doing my share.
Your share? You look like an agent standing there.
That fire's pretty important, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Makes the boat go, doesn't it?
That's right.
Supposing it goes out.
Supposing it does.
I'm ready.
Oh, well, that's... Pardon me. Thanks. Hey, what do you do around here?
Nothing. You in this picture?
No, taking a shortcut to stage 10.
Bing and Bob are making all these movies. They're appearing on each other's radio shows. They are doing golf benefits almost daily, so they're constantly together, more than most married couples are. But they're only together when there's a public watching them.
There were two smart guys who knew that hanging out off the camera and away from the business could result in wrecking what you had going. And they were kind of different type fellas as far as their home life went, and they didn't spend any time together. So when they arrived at the studio, when they arrived at the show, wherever they were going, whatever they were going to do, it was all fresh, it was all new. They enjoyed seeing one another again, they enjoyed working with one another again, and off they went.
How are you feeling tonight, Tisdale? This afternoon.
Oh, I feel very fine, Dumbo. I was up at the crack of my back this morning.
I passed your house last night.
You passed my house? Thanks.
Bing couldn't do a routine without having a joke about Hope and vice versa. All he had to do was mention ski nose and the insults, and it just, before he says the joke, the audience is howling.
When Hope was over here recently, did he do well? Did he score? Was he important? Well, we just finished a picture called The Road to Utopia, and I don't want to say what part of him was dragging, but it's the cleanest road picture we ever made.
You've got that something in your voice so right for selling cheese. Put it there, pal. Put it there.
I think your jokes are great.
Do you?
It's just that folks are hard to please.
Yeah.
I can't think of another fake feud that lasted that long. This went on for 35 years.
My colleague.
My crony.
My cohort.
My friend.
Companion.
Confederates.
Chums to the end.
Like meat and potatoes.
Or salt and tomatoes.
Boy, what a plan. Don't put it in the paper. Don't put it on the air. Don't put it on the shelf. Put it there.
The Kraft Music Hall with Bing Crosby, John Scott Trotter and his orchestra, Marilyn Maxwell, the Music Maids and Men, Yuki, the Charioteers, and Bing's guest this evening.
When Crosby began in radio, he was ordered to sing but not speak. That was the announcer's job. Slowly, he began to rebel. He invited his friends on the show. He began to relax and let his great sense of wit and wordplay come forward.
When he left CBS for NBC Radio to host the Kraft Music Hall, everything changes because he begins to sound like your neighbor.
Well, Fred, why can't people act normal, just like human beings?
Well, you cannot be a human being in radio, Bing. Not even the executives. They run through the halls on all fours, night and...
Today, if a network television show is a hit, you get about 6 million viewers. That is considered a spectacular success. Bing Crosby had 50 million people listening to his show weekly. 50 million people. He was the most familiar and beloved voice in the world.
The popularity of his radio show during the 30s and the 40s gave him this intimate relationship with the entire country. And the power that he had by having the popularity of that radio show was just incredible.
Crosby's success gave him the autonomy to spread what he considered nothing more than his good fortune.
Men whose wives were pregnant, he would bring them on the radio show. He would give them bit parts. But he really put himself on the line for a number of women whose careers were at risk, and he made them regulars on his radio show. The first one was Connie Boswell. Then it was Mary Martin, Peggy Lee.
With Garland, he felt a very special affection. And when she was fired from MGM, he rallied by her side when very few others would. He had her on his radio program, and she was sick. She had tried to kill herself.
She was standing in the wings, trembling with fear. She was almost hysterical. She said, I cannot go out there because they're all going to be looking to see if they're stars, and it's going to be terrible. Bing said, what's going on? I told him what happened, and he walked out on stage. And he said, we got a friend here, just had a little trouble recently. You probably heard about it. Everything is fine now. She needs our love. She needs our support. She's here. Let's give it to her, okay? Here's Judy. And she came out, and that place went crazy. And she just blossomed.
And what's more, I've lost my appetite. Stars that used to twinkle in the sky are twinkling in my eyes. I wonder why. Just in love, so in love. Be careful, it's my heart. It's not my watch you're holding, it's my heart.
Irving Berlin was a friend of Bing's, and he wrote some beautiful songs for him. Holiday Inn had many, many beautiful songs.
Berlin thought that Be Careful, It's My Heart was going to be the hit from the film. But White Christmas came along at a time in our country's history that nobody could have predicted, with the start of the Second World War, and then a resonance is attached to this song that is very, very deep. No one knew it was going to become iconic, not even Berlin, who was a very canny judge of his own work.
There was a verse to it, and we had quite a struggle at the time between Berlin and the producer, because the producer wanted to use the verse, and it was a very peculiar verse. It was long. The sun is shining, the grass is green, the orange and palm trees sway. I've never seen such a day in Beverly Hills, L.A.
I'm glad you didn't use it.
Berlin was right. Maybe if we'd used the verse, it might have killed the chorus. You never know.
By the summer of 1942, the record began to take off. Servicemen demanded White Christmas, and Decca shipped thousands of copies overseas. Within months, the song became an anthem.
It was a big, big record at that time, a single record. I was in France and Germany. I could tell you that, you know, hearing White Christmas, you talk about a lump in the throat every time you heard it.
I'm dreaming of a white Christmas, just like the ones I used to know, where the treetops glisten and children listen to hear sleigh bells in the snow. I'm dreaming of a white Christmas, with every Christmas card I write. May your days be merry and bright, and may all your Christmases be white.
Crosby's work during the war is really quite astonishing. He is at camp shows. He's constantly on tour. He's doing benefits. If he put his head out the window when there were audiences screaming, he would sing a couple of songs. He just really put himself out. And the servicemen appreciated that.
I was reluctant to sing it because it would put a rather sad note on the proceedings. Some of them, you could see tears in their eyes. It reminded them of home and mother and the family and the fact that they were so many thousand miles away and in the middle of a terrible war. It had a poignant value, I guess, that it wouldn't otherwise achieve.
The way Bing sang it with such depth and connection, people felt in that interpretation more than was there. And it became about the loss of our loved ones, about separation, about a certain mythology that we all yearn for.
And may all your Christmases be white.
It secularized Christmas in a way that was pretty nervy at the time. And that's what Berlin, who's of course a Jew, did with it. It not only secularizes it, but it Americanizes it. White Christmas was his, and it became an annuity because he became the Christmas man.
Between 1942 and 1962, White Christmas was on the top 40 every single year but one. To this day, it remains the best-selling record of all time.
Oh, I'm packing my grip, and I'm leaving today, 'cause I'm taking a trip California way. I'm gonna settle down and never more roam, and make the San Fernando Valley my home.
At the end of the war, when Yank magazine did a poll of who had done the most for GI morale, Crosby came in #1 over Eisenhower, MacArthur, Hope, the Pope, because all of these hundreds of thousands of returning servicemen really are returning with a certain love for him.
Bing Crosby taught America how to live. Everybody said, that's it. Let's walk away from all this anxiety. You know, let's just relax. Let's just spend a nice day in the country. Let's play a little golf.
Dad loved playing golf pretty much every weekend or waking moment. Of course, Roone Arledge and my dad, along with Arnold Palmer, collectively was a significant factor when television first came to exposing golf to the general public. I won the Burlingame Club Championship, and he called my mom and said it was the happiest day of his life, which I'm sure she didn't appreciate.
Throughout the war, Bing had been making shows for the Armed Forces Radio Service. These were on transcription discs. He thought if the transcription discs are good enough for the troops, why can't we do it on radio?
He had to do 2 radio shows a day. He said, both for my voice and for the fact that I'd like an afternoon off, I want to try and record this.
NBC is adamant that he continued to do 2 live shows, and Crosby goes on strike. The matter goes to court, and a judge declares his contract indentured servitude. Now a free agent, he quickly signs with Philco as his new sponsor on the ABC radio network, who are willing to let him pre-record his shows.
Recording technology changed dramatically in 1946 after the Second World War when the Allies bring tape recorders back from Germany, and the technical quality was extraordinary. It was high fidelity for the first time.
And he realized then the possibilities of tape. He could take bits out that didn't work. If a particular gag didn't work, he could cut it out. He could even dub in audience applause if there was a gap.
He recognizes that this is going to change the face of show business, and he becomes one of the investors to start a commercial manufacturing of tape recorders.
By 1947, a medium that had been entirely live the year before was now almost completely pre-recorded. Crosby's investment and promotion of the new technology paved the way for multi-track recording, videotape, and data storage.
For once in your life, you can give up, can't you?
Give up?
Give up. Who the hell sent you here, Sinatra? No. Sinatra had nothing to do with this, and I wouldn't talk that way about Sinatra.
I don't mean
if
to
were you.
malign Mr. Sinatra, because I'm a great fan of his, a great admirer of his private and public life.
Furthermore,
Why?
singers like Sinatra come once in a lifetime.
Why did he have to come along in my lifetime?
Saturday night is the loneliest night of the week. I sing the song that I sang for the memories I usually see.
Nobody had challenged Crosby from the moment he became an important recording artist. And then Frank Sinatra arrives, who deepens the interpretation of lyrics, something that Crosby had sort of started, and brings a kind of a soulfulness to singing, a personalizing it.
When Sinatra really bursts upon the scene, the press is creating all this rivalry between the two guys.
In fact, the only true rivalry that existed was between the fans.
Crosby was so secure with who he was, and even though Sinatra had tremendous fame, Crosby had already seen a lot of guys come and go.
Don't dance all night with me till the stars fade from above. They'll say it's all right with me. People will say we're in love.
I think Sinatra was the first popular singer to really appreciate the importance of accompaniments and how they would help him in what he wanted to do. You can't say the same about Crosby's arrangements from the 30s and 40s. Bing was never involved with the accompaniments. He turned up and sang the song.
Not until the early 1960s would Sinatra finally begin to outsell Crosby.
Bing said he really respected him as an artist, and he always said the best thing he ever did in the movies was Did You Ever?, the number with Frank in High Society.
We sing so rare, like old camembert, like ba-ba-rum. Don't dig that kind of crooning, chum.
You must be one of the newer fellas.
Have you heard it's in the stars? Next July we collide with Mars. Well, did you ever? What a swell party, a swell party, a swelligan, elegant party this is.
Good morning. Excuse me, but could you tell me where I'd find St. Dominic's Church?
Eh?
I'm looking for St. Dominic's Church.
Why?
I'm going to work there.
What's your name?
Father O'Malley. Charles Francis Patrick O'Malley.
At this point, Crosby is money in the bank. That's why they didn't want him to do anything too controversial, and that's why they fought against him doing the Priest film.
Say hello to the father. Hello, father.
Hi, fellas. Leo McCary, a director, very fine director, too, came to me and said he wanted me to play a priest, and I thought he'd flipped his whole top. Couldn't imagine me being believable or acceptable as a priest, but he convinced me, and it was a very lucky decision.
I was going to ask you something.
Oh, yeah. What made me become a priest?
No. About young Tony. What was it the police accused him of?
Stealing.
Stealing? Stealing what?
Turkeys.
Or would you like to swing on a star, carry moonbeams home in a jar, and be better off than you are? Or would you rather be a mule? And all the mountains...
At one point, Paramount backers offered to buy the film if they could destroy it rather than release it. They thought, if he fails in that, they will have killed their famous musical comedy star. Nobody will want to see him again.
The winner for the best acting performance in 1944 is the one and only Bing Crosby. Oh, we're not allowed to make any speeches, but...
You better say something, brother.
Say something. Leo McCarey can take a broken-down crooner like me and take me by the hand and lead me through a picture so deftly that I come up with this happy crockery here. Well, there's a chance for anyone. All you have to do is get Leo McCarey, I guess. Now, if he can just find me a horse to win the Kentucky Derby, it'll be the greatest parlay in history.
Do you think you deserved an Oscar for Going My Way?
Not really, no. I think there was a lot of better performances. I think it was sort of a sympathetic thing. I had a lot of big records at that time, and there wasn't any real competition. Most of the good actors were away at war or something.
Despite his modesty, Crosby was encouraged by the success of Going My Way and attempted to broaden his range. This rare screen test, filmed late at night behind guarded soundstage doors, shows an unrecognizable Crosby as humorist Will Rogers.
All I know is what I read in the papers.
The film would eventually be made in 1952, starring Will Rogers, Jr.
How's this sound to you, Dusty? All I know is what I read in the papers. There's been a heap of talk about establishing an air route from Alaska to Siberia. It's vital to our national defense, but Congress ain't interested. That's only natural, though. There ain't any votes in Siberia. Everybody step to the syncopated rhythm. Let's be going with them when they begin.
Crosby had become a cultural phenomenon in the United States, the first multimedia star of the 20th century. He ranks #1 in film, radio, and record sales for most of the 1940s. He owns a racetrack, a baseball team, and creates the first national pro-amateur golf tournament. Quintessentially American, cool and upbeat, never pompous, never smug or superior. He had become our most authentic icon, mirroring successive eras through Prohibition, Depression, war, and affluence. He was humble and steady. He was family.
Wait till you see my little sweetie and me step, 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 stepping around.
And yet, by the late 1940s, Bing is having trouble. First of all, there's trouble with Dixie because of the drinking. There's also trouble because Bing is never home. There's also trouble because the kids are getting of an age where they're acting up and he can't control them. They're kids.
I think Dennis and Philip were victims of fetal alcohol syndrome. You know, it wasn't something that was even known about at the time or could be helped.
Dolores Hope taught me. She said, we just drank. They just drank. There was nothing wrong with that. Everybody just drank.
I was an alcoholic from the time I was born. As far back as I can remember in my lifetime, to the earliest childhood memory that I have, I don't remember a time when terror, bewilderment, anxiety, and despair were on my shoulders constantly.
6 years after Bing's death, his first son, Gary, publishes a memoir that would forever tarnish the public's perception of Crosby. Some, including Gary's brother Philip, would refute the severity of the abuse detailed in the book.
He always said he didn't want any Hollywood kids in the house. That was one of his favorite phrases. He was frightened to death that we were going to become what his idea of rich kids were.
Being part of a family that produces some worthwhile children who become useful citizens, that's the most gratifying thing in life. Knowing that some children have resulted from your marriage that are going to be worthwhile people and good people and useful people.
There's an Irish myth. Praise a child and shame the devil. You'll just be terrible if you're told how wonderful you are.
He was the greatest letter writer you've ever seen. He could write love in a letter like to my mother like you couldn't believe. He could write chastising letters to me that were just, they were chewing me up, but boy, they were just masterpieces of English language.
Letter to Gary Crosby. Dear Gary, once again I hear very bad news about you and your weight. You are 14 years old now, and you should have acquired a little judgment, a little brains, a little common sense. I am not going to have you grow up into a fat, unattractive slob. If there's anything I can do to prevent it, you can be sure I will do it.
I don't think my father was acting much different than any other fathers of the time. The rules were there, they were laid down, they were expected to be obeyed. If they weren't obeyed, certain punishments were assigned, and those were the punishments that took place, and you never had a side to the story.
I am so tired of hearing about people who say that they're shocked that Crosby spanked his children or hit them. Crosby was the most candid performer you can think of. If you ask him a question, he tells the truth. And for 40 years, he kept talking about the way he disciplined his kids. He's put it in his book. It is all there. But people didn't believe it. People believed the persona of Crosby more than they believed him. And then years later, when the Crosby myth has begun to dissolve, they start to look at the persona differently. So that you hear people saying how cold he is. Nobody thought he was cold when they were watching the films when they came out.
A greyhound who had lots of speed was surely bound to fail.
His home life is unraveling as Dixie deteriorates further.
It got so that she didn't leave the house, and she would pass out, and the kids would come home, and she'd be, you know, on the floor. And I think that that's permanently scarring on just about every level for anybody.
He would put out the money to have the head psychiatrist of one of the major hospitals in this town come to our house every day, 2-hour sessions with my mother. And my mother would white-knuckle it. She'd sit there, she'd go through the session, she wouldn't drink anything else, and Dad would leave town, and it wouldn't be a matter of a day. The guy wasn't coming anymore, and Mom was drunk. It used to infuriate him. I remember him talking in the car. He wasn't talking as much to me as he was to himself. And he was saying, I pay for that psychiatrist to come to that house every day. He's the best there is, and God, nothing works. He couldn't figure it out. It's inconceivable to him, if you're doing something that hurts yourself, why you don't stop doing it.
So concentrate and clear your mind of schemes that never last, or you'll wake up someday and find your chances all have passed. You've been running around in circles, getting nowhere.
What terrified him, he didn't know how to sit her down and say, what's going on? Why are you drinking? What is it about? Can I help? There was just a big, long silence up at the other end of the hall for many, many years.
In 1952, at the age of 40, Dixie is diagnosed with ovarian cancer.
It was so sad because Dixie was very ill, and there was no real treatment for it. And it was a very sad, lonely way to die.
The doctors decide it is best not to tell Dixie that her cancer is terminal. Crosby is scheduled to shoot the film Little Boy Lost in Paris.
If he'd have said, no, honey, I'm gonna stay home, she'd have known in an instant something was wrong. So he had to go do that movie.
Dixie dies on November 1st, 1952.
And then there was the funeral, which was a friggin' circus. Cameramen and newspaper people and stuff climbing all over the limousine and all over the church. Got out to the graveyard and was standing on other people's headstones trying to shoot down into the grave. And through it all, man, he was just looking down. He was sitting there, his face was down, his head was down, and he was crying. And it was like he was alone. It was like there wasn't anybody else there.
They got an act together, and they toured around for a while, and they quarreled, and they had several agents, and they quarreled with them, and they quarreled with their employers, and they quarreled with their wives, and they had some miserable years.
They were called the Crosby Boys, and I don't know, they got furious at Gary and threw him out, and they had to do the Bing Crosby show, and Dad just jumped in and filled in and was the fourth Crosby boy.
so-and-so. Joshua, 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 Joshua. What's Jericho? Joshua, 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 what's Jericho? Jericho, and the walls came tumbling down.
He was always calling his lawyers and his accountants and trying to help them out.
Hello, it's John and Melanie. It grieves me a great deal that the boys are causing you so much trouble. The incident where you made an appointment to meet them and none of them showed up is certainly a clear indication of how irresponsible they are. I'm having a lot of problems trying to get Denny set for next fall. As you know, he flunked out of Washington State College. He's not a bum kid, Jack. The thing that concerns me is what is to be done with Lindsay. Is it possible to have him confined in a psychiatric ward at St. John's?
There were decades of cleanup. There were decades of marriages and divorces and illegitimate children and car crashes and fires and drunk and disorderly and hotel rooms trashed. It's a tragedy.
There had been some brain damage because of some chronic alcoholism and so forth. I have a slight inclination to believe he might be on some kind of a hallucinatory drug. Time goes by, I am increasingly embarrassed by the amount of trouble, concern, and worry that my boys have given you.
The walls came a-tumbling, the walls came a-tumbling, the walls came a-tumbling down.
After Gary's book came out, we were having lunch, and he felt a need to talk to me about it. I didn't bring it up. And he said, you know, it didn't really go down that way. I just, you know, they said it would be a good idea and it would sell a lot of books. And I just remember looking at him and thinking, how could you do that to your dad, to your family, to his legacy? And as a family, we just figured the more we left it alone, the sooner it would go away. And of course, in retrospect, that was a huge, incredible mistake. Because it's one of the things that people think of when his name comes up. Not this incredible legacy of good deeds and beautiful music, but, oh, he's the guy who hit his kid.
Plagued by years of substance abuse and mental health issues, Lindsay would commit suicide in 1989, as would Dennis in 1991. Both Gary and Philip would die of natural causes a short time later.
On one level, Dad had no clue how to fix it and didn't fix it. And I think he felt always that he had failed them.
When I'm worried and I can't sleep, I count my blessings instead of sheep. I fall asleep counting my blessings.
White Christmas was made the year after Dixie died, when Bing was talking about possibly walking away from his career. It had some great songs, and he also got to work opposite Rosemary Clooney, whom he liked very much.
She was a true confidant for him. He recognized her extraordinary intelligence and loved her singing, and he trusted her in a way that he trusted very few people. When Rosemary Clooney had a nervous breakdown in the late 1960s, she was so ill that most people never thought she would ever return. Bing calls her and asks her to do a show with him. And then he starts taking her on the road with him as he starts touring. She adored him for doing that.
I think perhaps Bing Crosby is responsible for my career because people had such trust in him. It was as though he would say, this is an okay person. People trusted me because of Bing, I'm sure of it.
I think Rosemary Clooney was his favorite partner because their range was so similar. His generosity really comes out when he's working with another performer. He loved singing the second part. He loved harmonizing. He liked to play up the co-star.
If you're worried and you can't sleep, just count your blessings instead of sheep, and you'll fall asleep counting your blessings
with Bing Crosby, Rosemary Clooney, and particularly Danny Kaye. The three of them were such incredibly smart, brilliant people. They knew that they weren't filming Shakespeare. Crosby later expressed privately that the film could have been better.
Letter to John O'Melveny. Dear John, The White Christmas is making money, but it is not near the picture it should have been because story-wise it was weak. With that title and that music and the cast involved, it could have been one of the all-time musical classics of the screen and could have almost doubled its intake. I've said it before, but this time I mean it. I'm not going to get involved in a picture that there is not genuine indication of hit possibilities.
Here, what's this? Rough on
I suppose it must be pretty apparent to anyone who goes to the movies much. Throughout a career of around 60-some-odd pictures, I've always played one character, Bing Crosby. But when Perlberg and Seaton came to me with this country girl proposal, it was obvious at once that the old routine just wasn't going to do, because Frank Elgin, my part, was a wholly different guy, and I must say that I had some serious qualms about my ability to accurately limn him.
Directed by George Seaton and co-starring Grace Kelly and William Holden, Crosby portrays an alcoholic actor trying to make a comeback.
Seaton was afraid initially to ask Crosby to even be in it. He thought it was too close to home, but Crosby read it and he said, of course I'll do it. He was anxious to do it.
They're pretty thorough rehearsals. 2 weeks of them, 10 hours a day, and this fella Seaton just driving me like a top kick. Never know 2 weeks on dialogue and characterization and reactions and bits of business. Where and how to spot a look, nuance, or expression that would help motivate the thing, tie it all together.
How they expect me to make these fast changes like this?
What's the matter? Haven't I been doing it right?
You've been doing it all right, but I want you out front watching my performance. Give me the dickie, come on.
But I can tell from here, Frank, you're doing it just wonderfully.
I am not, and you know it. Well, why don't they get me a dresser, Lord? For the money they're paying me, they could afford a dozen of them.
Do you want me to talk to Cook about it?
Yes, and while you're at it, tell him to stop that understudy from snooping around backstage. I come off just now, and he's hovering there like a vulture, just waiting for me to cave in.
I'm sure if you talk to Mr. Dodd about it, he...
You talk to him. Tell him to keep that guy out front and get me some new tissue. That stuff is murder.
I will right after rehearsal. Frank, I'm sorry I stepped on that line of yours in the depot scene.
Well, that's all right. Think nothing of that.
Just as I was so nervous.
Nervous? What's to be nervous about? It's just another show.
Where would you ever find another star as sweet as that?
What a wonderful guy.
The film was nominated for 7 Oscars, including Best Actor. Crosby would lose to Marlon Brando. The following year, he would re-team with Grace Kelly and co-star with Frank Sinatra and Louis Armstrong in High Society, a musical remake of the Philadelphia Story.
A reporter asked Crosby, who influenced you the most? He said, American music begins and ends with Louis Armstrong.
Crosby absolutely was captivated by the style, the phrasing, the ethos of Louis Armstrong. In 1936, he's making Pennies from Heaven, and he wants Louis Armstrong in the movie. And of course, the execs, they don't want Louis Armstrong in a film because he's a black guy.
They weren't going to give Louis any Billy at all, as far as I know. And Dad said, well, I'm going to go golfing, and when you figure it out, you come get me. He basically got the first equal billing for a black person in a white movie. And I'm so proud of that.
Though a lifelong Republican, Crosby staunchly opposed Joseph McCarthy, the Vietnam War, and Richard Nixon, and avoided being photographed with politicians at all costs.
What if one of the kids smoked marijuana?
I don't think, Mary, that's any great sin.
That wouldn't bother you?
Unless they abused it and got on it continuously. I think it should be legalized.
He had no issues with drugs or color or sexuality. It was about who you were, and it was about music.
Hey, Pops, you want to come up here and take a little, leave a little? If you sail, sailing over the sea, and when you wait for me, take my tip, they're all moto hip in Italy.
Well, I Reduce, as for France.
Oh, they six the
Yes, believe it or not.
I do believe, I do indeed.
Frenchmen's all prefer what they call les jazz high.
Formidable, take a plane, go to Siam. cock today, round the clock, oh, well, they all like to jam. The Indian song, the Amazon. Take one bar, and all of them are well gone. From the equator up to the pole, everybody wing a ring ding ding a ling, and that rock, 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 rock and roll. From the north to the south, east to the west, jazz is king, jazz is the thing that folks dig best.
Bing didn't like mushy songs. One of the things that we used to have to avoid was the declarative statement, I love you. In almost every love song we wrote for him, there was no I love you out and out. It was off the cuff.
Love is wonderful the second time around. Just as beautiful with both feet on the ground. It's that second time you hear your love song sung. Makes you think perhaps that love like youth is wasted on the young. Love's
I was walking onto the Paramount lot with my 7-year contract. I had a horsehair petticoat on, as everyone wore in those days, and I heard a voice behind me. It said, "Hi, Tex, what's your hurry?" And I stopped dead. It was Bing Crosby. He invited me for a cup of tea, and we had tea, and I looked into his big blue eyes, and about 15 minutes later, I realized I was in love. He was Hollywood royalty. And for him to date this little girl from Texas didn't make any sense to anyone with real knowledge of the world. He was getting stacks of mail saying, "Leave her alone."
We were going to get married 3 or 4 times, and I'd lose my courage. I just thought, I was worried or fearful that the difference in ages would be too much of a handicap. And I thought there'd be a lot of criticism. Actually, that shouldn't bother anybody too much. If you know what you want to do and you think it's right, you should go ahead and do it.
After the 4th proposal and the 4th regret, I finally realized that I could get along without Bing. And God bless him, Bing realized that he couldn't get along without me.
Crosby and Catherine were married in Las Vegas on October 24th, 1957. By 1961, the couple have 3 children, Harry, Mary, and Nathaniel.
You know, it just occurred to me, Bing, that you have been granted the rare privilege of having 2 families to raise, a generation apart. Do you think that you will profit by any of your previous experience?
I think so. I think I've learned some things that I'll try and put to good use raising these little ones.
He started shaking hands with Harry when Harry was 4. I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Well, he's a big boy. We shake hands." I said, "No, you don't. You hug him. When he's 105, you will hug him."
He wasn't a cuddly guy, but at the same time, he was very expressive. And there were many ways to show affection, and he did.
Mom just taught us to crawl all over him. It's like a dog that's not used to being petted. They're not entirely comfortable with it, but they end up loving it.
The family moves to the suburb of Hillsborough in the San Francisco area.
He could have moved anywhere. I think he really wanted to kind of push the reset button and with our family, move in an area that was more of a, I don't want to say normal environment. He was available for us, but it wasn't so much of, I'm going to be at home for my children. It was more of like, you know, I'm going to do this and you can come along for the ride.
I think I'm with him a lot more, because I'm not working that much. And when we do travel, we take them with us, because Catherine has a teacher certificate, and she takes their schoolwork with us and has a little session every day with them. And they've been all over the world with us.
We were given independence along with the responsibility of not getting into trouble. I think we were blessed that way because we had parents who were somewhat structured, but they were also open-minded and wanted us to run as far and as fast as we could.
There was a generation of performers who went through everything from vaudeville to radio to movies to television, and generations knew them. But he's one of those figures at this point. He's one of those people that your parents know. But rock and roll has changed everybody's perspective. And so he's beginning to seem not so much cool as grandfatherly.
The age, of course, limits the roles that I'm able to play, but still people like Stewart, Fonda, and many others of similar age seem to be working all the time and in good film. I know everywhere I go, I'm mobbed by all kinds of people. I'm stopped on the street constantly. There doesn't seem to be any appreciable decrease in the name value that I formerly had, and still they're not able to get me a job in a film. Nothing but the gravest emergency is going to drive me into television. The more I watch it, the more I'm convinced that these people who are doing television indiscriminately are killing themselves with the public.
Every year, the newspapers would have a feature about the 10 highest paid Americans. And starting in the late 30s, Crosby begins to appear on the list. And by the early 1940s, he's routinely in the top 5. And yet, for all the money he's bringing in, he's constantly in trouble with the IRS, in part because he invests so much money into his horse farm, in part because he wagered a lot of money and usually lost. And when Dixie died, the IRS came after him, and for Bing to pay, he had to start selling some properties. So while he amassed ultimately a terrific fortune, he played it pretty close to the limit.
Well, you said TV eats people. It'll eat you up in just a couple of years. If you perform often and you do your best numbers, you've given them away.
Bing Crosby, opening, take 2.
Life's great, life's grand, future all planned. No more clouds in the sky. How am I riding? I'm riding high.
But the lack of film roles, coupled with the demise of radio, ultimately did lead Crosby to television, which he quickly embraced, leading to a series of specials where he could duet with some of his favorite performers.
Row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. Merrily, merrily, merrily,
your boat gently down the stream. Merrily, 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 life is but a dream.
Row, row,
row your little boat
row, row,
gently down the stream.
row.
Very merrily, life is just a pretty little dream.
The sleepless nights, the daily fights, the quick toboggan until you reach the heights.
I'm glad I'm not young anymore.
Think of this, the furtive sigh, the blackened eye, the words I love you till the day I die.
I'm glad that I'm not young anymore.
Think of that confusion, that morning after surprise, and the self-delusion that when you're telling those lies, she isn't wise. Why is good old reliable Nathan, Detroit. If the size of your bundle you want to increase, why, he'll arrange that you go broke in quiet and peace. In a hideout provided by Nathan, where there are no neighbors to squawk. It's the oldest established permanent floating crab game in New York. Yes, it's the oldest established permanent floating crab game in New York.
By the late 50s into the early 70s, it's television where Americans know him. And one of the places a lot of Americans know him is the Christmas shows.
Jingle bells, jingle
My goodness, I was not happy in the Christmas shows. I was trying very hard not to be animated or to smile or to show any enthusiasm or spirit for fear that I was going to be razzed at school.
I think if you look in retrospect and you go, oh my God, this is not great art. This isn't even decent music. This is just someone who is fantastic, who wants to share his family. I think my brother was the only one with talent, Harry. He could play guitar and piano, and the rest of us were sort of staggering around and singing badly.
In a one-horse open sleigh, our finest gifts we bring, rum-pa-pum-pum, rum-pa-pum-pum, rum-pa-pum-pum. Peace on earth, can it be?
We had decided that we wanted them to do a duet of A Little Drummer Boy. And when we told Bowie about the number, he said, I won't sing that song. And we said, why? He said, I hate that song. He said, if I have to sing that song, I can't do the show. And he said also, I'm doing the show because my mother loves Bing Crosby.
We decided the best way to salvage the arrangement was to do a counter melody that would fit in between the spaces and maybe write a new bridge and see if we can sell them that. And it all happened rather rapidly. I would say within an hour we had it written and were able to present it to him again.
He'll see the day of glory. I played my day for him when men of goodwill live in peace, live in peace.
Bing loved the challenge, and he was able to transform himself without losing any of the Crosbyisms that relaxed the feeling and the atmosphere that he would always create whenever he was on camera.
Can it be? It's a pretty thing, isn't it?
In the 1960s, he talked about how he was going to stop singing, and he said his voice didn't sound so good. And yet, in the 1970s, it's like there's some magic elixir that comes into his voice where he is singing with such authority and depth and musicality that it's fantastic.
I fell in love with you first time, look into them, their eyes. You got a something to me first with them, their eyes. They make me feel happy, they make me blue. No, darling, I'm falling blue in a great big way for you. You're working in their days, looking in them, their eyes. You better watch them if you're wise. Oh, they sparkle, they bubble, gonna get you in a whole lot of trouble. There's no real first time, let me do them, their eyes.
He was shooting the celebration of his 50th anniversary in show business. It was an all-star evening. The producer had him on a riser.
The stage goes down to the basement, and they put the band on the stage, and then they raise it up.
Just one more night.
I'd just finished the last song, and I stood out in front and thanked everybody and said my goodnights, flushed with success, turned to make my exit stage right in the wings, and there was no stage. I stepped right off into space.
It should have killed him. It didn't, but it should have. He decided that he wanted to go back and do some songs and go back to the theater. And I remember going into his dressing room before opening night, and he's reading the paper and he's drinking a Carnation instant breakfast. And I said, Dad, aren't you nervous? And he looked at me over the paper and he said, nervous? What's there to be nervous about? And that was real.
Crosby takes the show to the London Palladium for what is to be a multi-city tour.
Nothing but blue skies.
The last concert at the Palladium, something interesting happened. They were standing on the chairs. At one point, he put his arms around the audience in a gesture and mouthed, I love you. And it's the first time I'd ever heard him or saw him say that to anyone, because he did not say that easily. But he really, really meant it, and it was mutual.
When you're in love, my, how they fly.
Dad had decided, you know, strangely, not to continue with the tour. It wasn't apparent that he didn't feel good. He just said, you know, I don't think I want to do this. So he was invited on a trip to Spain. He wanted me to go with him and play golf, and I informed him that I was enrolled and attending college in London, and couldn't leave.
Nothing but blue skies from now
on. Evidently he died of a massive heart attack, and that he was in only momentary discomfort, if any. He might never have known what happened to him. He told me that they had played 18 holes at a golf course. I don't know the name of it. That Bing had a very good round. I'd like that to be said.
The two choices we had as a family were to have like an incredible, extraordinary, over-the-top production because everybody in the world would want to be there. Or we could follow his wishes of Under the Radar and do it at 6 in the morning with just the very few dearly beloveds. And that's what we chose to do.
He went out on top of his game. He was wonderful. And he was with friends and doing what he loved.
Where the blue of the night meets the gold of the day, someone...
It was the combination of that face, that voice, that personality, that peculiar way of talking.
How am I doing? Great. That's him, all right.
He was an institution unto himself.
There is an absolute timeless quality to what he did. Great art survives the ages, and Crosby's ability to communicate in a song remains undiminished.
He's one of the absolutely crucial, indispensable, essential, and still utterly imaginative and satisfying voices in American music.
If you were writing the book and it said Bing Crosby, and then you had to do a couple of lines afterwards to describe this guy in show business, what would you say?
Well, I'd say he sang a fair song in tune most of the time, that he could read lines pretty good, had a good sense of comedy timing, fair vocabulary, and not a bad fellow all around. That's about it.
Want to call it a day? There's still enough light outside for some baseball.
Let's sing some more, Father. Yeah, let's go ahead. Yeah, come on. Yeah, come on, let's sing.
Whistle and dream your cares away. Castles may tumble, that's fate after all. Life's really funny that way. Sang the wrong melody, we'll play it back. See what it sounds like, hey, hey.
To learn more about Bing Crosby, visit pbs.org/American Masters or find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Tumblr. Bing Crosby Rediscovered is available on DVD for $24.99. The soundtrack is also available for $15.98 plus shipping. To order, call 1-800-336-1917 or write to the address on your screen.